Hey VC members, it's Matt and I'm back with yet another Paul McCartney video reviewing his albums in order of release. And yeah, yesterday I did a review for this one, McCartney 2. So we're moving on to the next one. Just wanted to add real quick on McCartney 2. I didn't show this yesterday. This is the Super Duper Deluxe Edition, the archive series that I got a few years ago when that came out. And so that's a neat thing. Wanted to just add that a couple of things. First, this was originally envisioned as a double album, and with the bonus tracks that you get on this, there are a lot of those songs. A couple of those came out as B-sides on 45s, but a couple of them didn't come out, I guess, until this came out. Maybe they were bootlegged, I'm not sure, but it's kind of a shame that he didn't make this a double album because quite a few of these I really like what would have been album 2, Blue Sway, Check My Machine, which was a B-side, Bogey Wobble, which is a little bit different than Bogey Music, Secret Friend's a good one, Mr. H. Adam, All You Horse Riders, just fun, weird, out of the ordinary, different stuff from Paul, and it's a shame that that didn't come out back then. Or at least he could have dumped one of these days and probably Waterfalls and picked one of those other songs in its place. It would have made a stronger album, I think. The other thing about this was I did yesterday for that review kind of copied Joe's new review technique, which was something that he got from Rockboy 680. And I know Ross Goodall does the same, where they rate each song on a scale of 1 to 10, and then at the end they add those up and divide them by the number of songs on the album. That gives the average and the overall grade of the album. When I did that, I came up with, I think, 74 point something or other. And so it ended up being a 7 for that album, which when you're looking at the individual songs, maybe, but when you're looking at the album as a whole, this album I would rate as higher than a 7. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to rate the songs 1 to 10 on the individual songs, and then just give the grade at the end for the album that's sort of my grade, which takes into consideration the technical artistic merits of the album on one hand, and just sort of the impression and the heart and soul feeling that I have for it on the other, because I would rate this more. This is one of my favorite of McCartney's solo albums, and I would rate this closer to a 9, even though adding up the individual songs doesn't give that result. I think you need to take the intangibles into consideration of just how it makes you feel, and cover art, and your memories of the album coming out, in addition to the artistic uh, considerations of the individual songs and performances and so forth. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but that's the way I'm going to do it. And yeah, I mean, I think it's all subjective anyway. As you give a song a 10, doesn't mean that all 10s are created equal. There are several songs on here, if I remember correctly, that I gave a 10 to. I'm not going to say necessarily that they're artistic great masterpieces on par with something like A Day in the Life or You Really Got Me, or Change Is Going to Come or something like that, but 10's a 10, and 10s are different, I guess, as are 5s or 6s or 4s or whatever, if that makes any sense. But so that's with McCartney 2. So he's had a good run right now. He's had London Town was a pretty good album. Back to the Egg, in my estimation, is a great album. Probably my second favorite McCartney solo album. This is right up there too. It's one of my favorite McCartney solo albums. And so with that, we come to April 19th of 1982, and the next release is Tug of War. Mr. Eminem had commented on my video that he's not sure why he's trying to get a copy of this, I guess, and the only thing available is the archive edition. I'm guessing he's wanting to find an original copy. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm sure if you go on Amazon or eBay, you can track down, or just a good used record store, you can probably find an original copy of this pretty easy, because it got to #1 in the US and in England, and got to #1 in several countries as well. So sold quite a few copies and was a popular album. It shouldn't be too hard to find, and it shouldn't be too expensive. This is the copy I bought in 1982. You can see a little bit of ring wear there on the front and back. And but I also got, whenever this came out, was oh, I don't know when it came out, but a few years back. Also got the archive edition, which is a double album, has the original album and has a bonus disc of tracks that were not on the original album. And there is the gatefold, which is the inside sleeve of this album. I always like that picture. This was recorded, I believe, in England and in Montserrat, and I'm guessing that is not England. It doesn't look like it with the beach and the umbrella and all that. And here's one of the inner sleeves. The other one just has the lyrics, but there's another pretty good picture of Paul sitting out there at the beach, by the beach. And on the other side, we've got Paul, and there's Stevie Wonder, Carl Perkins, and some of the other people that played on the record. So this continues his, this course was the first album released after John Lennon was killed by Paul, and it has a tribute to John we'll get to here in a few minutes. This was, I sort of misspoke on the McCartney 2 album saying that Wings was finished and over with. Wings was still technically existed, even though for all intents and purposes they were over when he did McCartney 2. But he officially disbanded Wings sometime before this album, between McCartney 2's release and before the release of this album. So I think, and I could be wrong here, that some of these songs were maybe thought of as for the next Wings album, but then he decided to put the band to rest and just go on as McCartney, solo guy, but of course with other musicians backing him up. And so yeah, very good album. We will get into the tracks. I remember buying this when it came out and was well pleased with it, and still am to this day. So side one starts with the title track, which is Tug of War, of course. It's sort of a big grand statement opening song. Works really well as an opener. Works really well as a song. It's just sort of imagining a better world where people get along instead of the world we live in, and wondering why the world we live in is the way it is. But I like it a lot. I'm going to give that one a 10. And again, that goes back to not all 10s are created equal. I'm not saying this is as good as Hey Jude or, as good as Gimme Shelter or whatever, but somehow, some way, it's still a 10 in my book. Second song, Take It Away, is just an upbeat, sweeping, majestic song. In some ways, this kind of sounds like a distant cousin to Backseat of My Car from Ram, which is one of my favorite McCartney solo songs. But Take It Away is just really like the song, so it's a 1-2 punch with the first 2 songs. That gets a 10 as well. Somebody Who Cares kind of slows the tempo down a little bit. And for the third song, it's just a great laid back, sort of low key, nice song. I really like that. I'm going to give that a 9. What You're Doing is number 4, and that's the first of 2 duets or shared songs that Paul did with Stevie Wonder. I think it's the better of the 2. It's just a really slinky, funky sort of soul number with Paul and Stevie. Got a good bounce and a good vibe to it. That gets a 10 as well. So side one's shaping up pretty good. Then we close side one with Here Today. That's the song that Paul had actually started recording this album before John Lennon's murder. I think summer of 79 maybe is when he started on this, but definitely in 79. And then he postponed, held up recording for a while in the aftermath of that. But Here Today was written about John and his relationship, him and John's relationship with each other. It's a touching song, basically acoustic and just Paul singing. And, it had a pretty powerful punch coming as it did just a few months after the fact back then. Still holds up today. I give it a 10. It's I do wish when he does his concerts the last 20, 30, whatever years, he always plays that. I wish he would sort of put it to bed for a while, and if he wants to pay tribute to John, play a John song, Beatles song, or a solo song instead. But it's a great song nonetheless. It gets a 10. So we move on to side two, and we open side two with Ballroom Dancing, which probably is my favorite Paul McCartney solo song post post 70s, and it's right up there with my favorite of his in the 70s too. So Ballroom Dancing, I just love it. I love the guitar middle part of it. I love the horns that sound like a siren. I love just everything about it. It's just a great sort of bouncy pop rock and roll song, and I can't say enough good things about it. Obviously, that gets a 10. The next one is The Pound is Sinking, which is kind of quintessential McCartney sound, but also sounds a little bit different for him too at the same time. He pulls that off somehow. Sounds really 80s, but it also sounds like a song that could just as well have been on, say, Ram or Band on the Run. I remember at the time there was a local band that I knew in Fort Worth that played. They were called the Stingrays, and they just played around the clubs and the college fraternity parties and so forth. And they just played old cover band. They just played old 60s and 70s and stuff. And I remember them playing this, which was kind of cool because they played it probably within like a week or two of this album coming out. That always kind of sticks into my mind. But I love that song too. I give it a 10. Next we have Wanderlust, I guess. Um, this is my least favorite song on the album, and I give it a 0. I'm just seeing if Joe's still awake there. I'm kidding. It gets a 10 as well. These 10s are getting to be kind of boring on this album, I guess, in a way. But upbeat ballad. I really like the horns. I like the parts where Paul overdubs himself singing, counterpart singing over himself. Great song. It gets a 10. We move on to number 4, which is Get It, which is a duet with Paul and Carl Perkins. And of course, he was a big influence on the Beatles. They covered several of his songs. George was a big fan, especially. Just sort of a comfortable, relaxed rockabilly duet. I love the laughter at the end of the song. I guess a 10 as well. Next is Be What You See, which is just a short little snippet of music. Sounds like something that might have been held over from the McCartney 2 album because it doesn't really sound much like anything else on this album. Whereas with McCartney 2, he went out of his comfort zone. He was doing different weird experimental things. He wasn't really trying to make a commercial album because that started off as just stuff that he was messing around in his home studio, having fun doing, and he didn't even initially intend for that to be an album till later. This one was definitely crafted to be an album, a commercial album, and a pop and rock and roll album. So Be What You See is just a little snippet. Sounds a little weird and out of place on this album. I don't know if it was actually left over from earlier or if it's something he came up with during the time of recording this album. It's not much to it. I think it's like 43 seconds long, and it's not good. It's not bad. It's just sort of there. I give it a 6. Excuse me. Dress Me as a Robber. Dress Me Up as a Robber is the next song on side 2. It's another soulful sort of good vocals. Got a Spanish guitar in it, in and out. Nice soulful number. I like it. I give it a 9. And we end the album with the number 1 hit single that everyone knows, and that's a love or hate song, kind of like Temporary Secretary, Ebony and Ivory, another duet with Stevie Wonder. It's 2 things. I mean, Stevie Wonder by this time, Stevie Wonder's great. I love him. great singer, but pretty much after Songs in the Key of Life, he just sort of nosedived quality wise and never really did much a note after that worth listening to, in my opinion. But it's great to hear Paul and Steve. I mean, they're still both in great voice, so it's great to hear these two great vocalists singing together. Uh, it's overplayed. It's a naive song, a lot of people say, which, in my opinion, is probably the fact that we think of it as, a lot of people think of it as naive, speaks more to our failings and the failings of the song, because it's just basic and simplistic and naive to some degree, but you can't really knock the sentiment. I do love the cheesy synth intro to the song. The middle section, though, that's got kind of bad 80s music and vocals, I'm not so crazy about. Overall, it's not a song that I really ever go out of my way to hear, but it's just not a song that I ever really disliked either. Um, it is what it is. It's not one of his best, but I'll give it a 7. And that wraps up the album. But I do have to mention two of the B-sides that I wish there would have been a way to get on the album, because they're both great. Rain Clouds is just sort of an endearing sing-along quality to the song. It's got towards the end, it goes into sort of an Irish reel, an Irish jig. Just a upbeat, fun song. I give that a 10 as well. I'll Give You a Ring is another one that was the flip side of, I don't remember which single, uh, but just it's old-fashioned, not really a Paul Granny music song, but it's an old-fashioned sounding song, but it sounds updated too at the same time, sort of like he did with Pound is Sinking, even though this sounds much more old-fashioned than Pound is Sinking. Great song, I give it a 10. And as I'd mentioned to Joe the other day, it's a shame because there's so many great Paul McCartney B-sides and just sort of stray tracks that never got the attention they deserve because they're really good. And I wish that he would, he talked about that for years, the so-called Cold Cuts album, but I wish that he would put those together on a CD set or an album set, and from beginning of his career all the way up to now, because there's a ton of those out there, and a lot of times they're as good or better than some of the songs on the albums, or even some of the hits. So this album gets a 10 from me, and it was a great one. Pretty good cover there. Like I said, I really like this shot. It's a 10. I'll be back with the next one, and we will see you all then.